Train drum roll for the beginning of the meeting.
So I will call the meeting to order. It is November 10, 2021 at 2 p.m. We'll have the invocation.
Dear Father in heaven, we thank you for the time that we have together to be to practice democracy in the city of Woodcreek. Be that even though it is such a small locale, that we have democracy here, Father, and we can continue to practice local government. We thank you for this past city council. We thank you for the future city council. Father, we just ask for blessings upon it. Father, as we continue forward, we ask for wisdom and strength as we move forward into this new season. Thank you for blessings upon Woodcreek, Hayes County, Texas, United States. Pray on this name.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible.
And City Secretary, if you'll call the roll, please.
Mayor Gloria Whitehead. Here. Mayor Pro Tem Aurora LeBrun.
Here.
Councilmember Judy Brisendine.
Here.
Councilmember Bob Hambrick.
Here.
Councilmember Brent Foley.
Here.
Councilmember Jeff Rusko.
Here.
And we have a quorum, and we'll proceed to public comments. I have one request. Ray Don Hilly. Ray Don, do you want to speak now, or do you want to wait?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
We're on 2.
That's great. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. It's good to see everyone. It's been a while. Lots been going on. But first off, I just want to, not sure where Danny went, but hopefully you'll see the recording. I want to make sure Campaign Judea knows how much we all appreciate that they continue to host us here, and I think it's a wonderful setting for a meeting. I wanted to speak about the tax notes and the general obligation bonds. I think that's a great discussion to have. Get tired of hearing back when I was on council, but it's true. Back in 2017, the last meeting before I joined the council, the vote was made to issue the tax notes that we are paying off right now. And I objected then, and I object today, even though I didn't have a vote, because those had no voter approval other than, through elections. And anytime you're approving something that is a multiple of the city budget, it seems like you need to go directly to the voters. And so when you discuss tax notes and geo bonds, it makes a big difference in the length of the financing, the interest rates you can get. I get it. Geo bonds are great because you get your public work done right away. You get the roads built. And then for the next 20, 30 years, however long you're financed, the people who are using them are the ones who end up paying for them. In any case, just wanted to say I'm glad that's on the agenda, and I hope whatever route the council ultimately goes will remember that the voters need a voice in what their hard-earned tax dollars are being spent on. But really, I just want to thank you all for being here today. I think this meeting in any year, the election cycle, the budgeting cycle, this meeting, seems like it could be a throwaway meeting because you're in between councils right now, but I think it's actually in some ways the most important meeting because after a hard-fought campaign, everyone's back here for one last meeting before the new council to show that we do all get along. We do come together. We do work for consensus. And we do all want what's best for our city. And we are all neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you, Raydon. So we have no other public comments. And there is on the agenda just a short statement of recognitions. And I thought I would just take a moment. We have a representative who's going to be coming shortly to discuss the agenda item 1, and he's delayed. So I thought I'd go ahead and just talk about this comment of recognitions. And what I would like to say is that my 2-year term is ending, and we'll be actually swearing in and having a new council coming in. So we, of course, want to thank and to speak to all of those individuals over the last 2 years who have really been stepping up, have worked for the city, volunteered in so many different positions. We, of course, want to congratulate Jeff Brasto, who is our mayor-elect, and Councilmember Pulley, who will be joining once again. He's re-elected, and I don't see Deborah Hines in attendance, but we'll certainly acknowledge her election. So I do want to thank, during the first year of my term, Nancy Brittner served as our mayor pro tem. Bill Shield was on council. Charlie LeCompte was elected and served. Vicki Alford served as council member, along with Councilmember Pulley and myself as mayor. During the second year, Judy Brusendine joined the council. Bob Hamburg joined the council. Jeff Brasto, Aurora LeBron, and Aurora acted as our mayor pro tem and did such an excellent job in that position. And together, this council, both the first and the second year of my term, and our terms, named unprecedented numbers of citizen volunteers to serve on P&Z, to serve under the reactivated Parks Board. I see that Pat Rawlings is here, who's been chairing that board. We thank you. So this is a thank you for all of those who have served, both as council members and as citizen volunteers in these various boards and commissions. In addition, we named a comprehensive plan committee that then became a work group. We named an emergency planning advisory committee. We have a streets and roads advisory committee and an ordinance review committee. I dare say that there are in excess of 25 to 30 citizens who have served on in these various capacities for our city. I thank all of them, all of you, and I think that the community has a big thank you to all of the volunteers who have done such an outstanding job. We're also grateful for our city staff. I can't even begin to say that under the COVID issues, under the various challenges this community has been enduring, the staff stayed the course. And we kept the business of the city uninterrupted during many of those challenges. So I do thank all of our staff, manager, of course, our city attorney cannot be left out of our thank yous, but Wymore has helped us steer through a lot of very difficult and challenging times over the last several years. We thank the citizens, of course, all of you who have not necessarily come up and served, but you've always had the opportunity and you've made your voices heard. That's what democracy is about. That's what we appreciate, and we thank you. And of course, we thank the Camp Young Judea, for saving us in times of need, because we truly had no place to meet under the circumstances of COVID and the needs to social distance. So I hope that that will be something that everyone will acknowledge and realize the value that the camp brought to us. It still brings delicious cookies and our meetings, and we're very happy. So I'm just wishing Mayor-elect Brasco the best of luck and the new council as they come into office, and that we all reach out to lift up and to help and to continue the Woodcreek winning ways. And I appreciate it. Thank you all. So we will go to the consent agenda. And the consent agenda item is approval of the city council minutes from October 13, 2021. And do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I make a motion that we approve the minutes of October 13, 2021.
So Councilmember Hamburg has made the motion to approve the consent item 1, the approval of the city council minutes. Do I have a second?
Second.
Councilmember Pulley, second. Is there any discussion? City Secretary, will you call the roll, please?
Mayor Pro Tem LeBrun.
Aye.
Councilmember Brissenden.
Aye.
Councilmember Hamburg.
Aye.
Councilmember Pulley.
Aye.
Councilmember Vesco.
Aye.
Unanimous approval of the motion. We'll move to the regular agenda, and I don't believe our,
He has been detained. He should be here within the next 10 minutes.
well, what we'll do, if it's, everyone approves, we'll go forward and go to the item 3, and items 3, 4, and 5 are actions discussing changes to various ordinances. So we'll look at item 3, discussion and take appropriate action on a resolution of the City Council of the City of Woodcreek supporting, oh, actually, I'm not on that. I'm not on the ordinance issue. I'm on the resolution, sorry. Discussion and take appropriate action on a resolution of the City Council of the City of Woodcreek supporting a grant application of the VFW Post 6441. And Manager Lewis, would you explain that resolution and what it entails?
Yes, you do have for your resolution M. When we've been using the VFW for other meetings, the town hall meetings, they discussed with us to see if the city would do a letter of support or resolution supporting their applying for the $50,000 to upgrade their facilities. It is a grant from T-Mobile that costs the city nothing. You know, this is just showing our support, but there's several upgrades we want to form out there, including new signage, making the actual arena more handicap accessible, and just upgrading the facilities overall. And of course, I think everyone knows how important the VFW is to this area, and therefore that's why the resolution is on the agenda for council's consideration.
So do I have a motion?
I would like to make a motion. I would like to make a motion that we issue a resolution from the city of Woodcreek in support of the VFW Post 6441 and their request for a grant from T-Mobile. I believe they are deserving. They're valuable, have been a valuable part of our community for many years, and they are in a process and in need of funds to improve their facilities.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Councilmember Rasmus? So we have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem LeBrun and to approve the resolution, and a second by Councilmember Russell. Is there any discussion? There being none, City Secretary, call the roll.
Councilmember Rasko,
Aye.
Councilmember Pulley,
Aye.
Councilmember Hambrick,
Aye.
Councilmember Brizendine,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem LeBrun.
Aye.
The motion carries unanimously. So we will go to item 4, discussion and take appropriate action on an ordinance amending Title 7, Traffic Code, Chapter 70, Traffic Schedules, Schedule 4, City Parking, A, the City of Woodcreek Code of Ordinances as it relates to visibility. So do I have a motion to begin discussions?
I make a motion to begin discussions on the parking ordinance.
Do I have a second?
I second that.
We have a motion by Councilmember Hambrick and seconded by Councilmember Brizendine. And we'll open for discussion. So Manager Lewis.
Sure.
you want to take-
And if the council refer to item number 4, schedule, for city parking A. The wording, about, it'd be the second full, sentence, no such vehicle, trailer, or recreational vehicle shall be parked on a street or within any property unless same is not visible. And then the second part says, covering said vehicle shall not be construed as being out of sight. What has happened is, of course, this was addressed because we do have some people that have carports, things like that, and they would park their trailer there, but it would still be visible from the street. But if someone has their trailer or vehicle that is parked in their garage that is not supposed to be visible, then if their garage door is open, for any length of time, it is visible from the street. I was looking just about how many times this parking ordinance has been before the city council. And the first time was in 2015, and the second time was 2019. So it looks like it comes back about every 2.5 years. But the question is about the way that it is worded. It is very definitive that it says not visible. And so that is where we've had some citizens that are questioning about the wording itself, and therefore it was placed on the agenda for council to decide if they want to take any type of action or refer to any other body.
So that's my question is going to be if the action requested is to refer the matter to ordinance review, or is that?
If I may, that's my thought. I mean, there are instances where the ordinance is not just this ordinance, but others, well-intended, but with unintended consequences. And if someone's got a small trailer that fits in their garage, and the garage door is open for 5 minutes, and Joe happens to drive by and write them up, that just, I mean, there's got to be a better way. And I hope that the ordinance review committee would take a look at that. Take a look, especially maybe at the covering part of that ordinance, so that if it is appropriately covered, or if it's only visible for less than a certain number of hours. I mean, there's a lot of things that they could look at. Say, can we make this a little less onerous, and help our citizens who have this need to store that trailer, off-site, if they've got the space in their own garage, is that's gonna be a lot of money. So it's like, if we can help, I'd like to try to do that.
So, Bud, we have a motion and a second to discuss. Do we need a motion to refer to the ordinance review?
I think so, and I think it probably would be good.
Or
to
could it
provide some
be?
parameters on
Could it be part of an amendment to his motion
that.
or a new motion?
No, there could be a new motion because based on the first and the second, the discussion's already occurred. So it would be voting to.
So is there, let me go forward then. Is there any further discussion on the matter? Councilmember Pulley.
do we want to provide any, I guess, insight or instruction to the ordinance committee is what we're concerned about? Because we do have an absurd result where the garage door opens and you can see a trailer in there, and then they get cited for that. So how much can we advise the ordinance committee as to what we're concerned about? Can we do that? Do we do that in the form of motion, or how's it done?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I can tell you, I think my biggest concern with this is the first sentence. It says, owners, tenants, or occupants of any residence used for residence purposes shall be required to park their vehicles in garages, carports, or driveways. It tells them what they must do. And then if they ultimately comply with the ordinance, they can somehow be in violation for it. So I think the idea is that, one, you don't want certain things parked in a driveway. In other words, if Captain Hamburg drives home this evening and has his vehicle parked in his driveway, I presume that's not objectionable because it's his driveway and he can have it there. But it would become problematic if it were, say, a boat or an RV or a trailer. But then you look at that, a carport is outside. So even if a vehicle is parked on a carport, it would still be visible. So I would think that if the council has no objection generally to things being visible, then the recommendation should be that vehicles can be visible insofar as they are parked in specific locations and there's no more than X number of vehicles. You don't want 5 vehicles parked in the driveway. And then you take those things that you don't want to be visible from anywhere, a boat, a trailer, an RV, etc., and then clearly define that those things cannot be visible.
Well, my question, Councilmember Pulley, do you want to follow up on that?
I'm okay.
I just thought my question is there a need to go to ordinance review, or can you, or would we just send it to legal counsel to draft?
Yeah, I would
think if Councilmember Pulley has issues, which I agree with on this totally, that perhaps it would be best to have council pursue the draft and work with management, with Manager Lewis, and then come back to council with the proposal. That could be reworded for a motion.
The real guidance that I would look for is what number of automobiles, a truck, a car, an SUV, a Jeep, whatever you want to call it, would someone be allowed to have parked in their driveway before it would then become a problem?
Right, so perhaps you could, Councilmember Pulley.
Are we addressing that today, the number of cars in the driveway? I thought we were more concerned with just the trailer issue, and if it's in the garage, if it's okay. I don't know if we want to get into that.
Well, there is, one of the other items is on parking
We
spaces.
have
Yeah, so it's related.
Okay.
The two items on the agenda are related. They're separate from
I
the
think
agenda.
that the question that I was just posing to council is if, in fact, you would prefer to have legal counsel make what it is that you would like to have changed versus going to ordinance review. Councilmember Fuller.
I think it would kind of get to the point quicker to have legal start working on it. I think we'd be able to express kind of what we're thinking and then have the legal start working on it. Maybe a faster process that way, more effective.
So do you want to put that in a motion?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was just under the impression that, everything had to go to the review committee, and because they're there, they look at it and then make recommendations, it goes from there. I personally would rather see it go, to council and to the.
Well, I don't think there's any directive that you have to send it to ordinance review. That is often a very good choice. However, if you find that this might be more amenable to have the legal counsel look at it and come back to council with a proposal, that might be a good way to go. I have more discussion. Judy?
It might be a little
Councilmember
more,
Brisendine?
it might be a little more expedient to take it through legal first, but I think it would be a good idea, since our ordinance review committee has been looking at ordinances over and over, that it pass through them before it comes back to us. So that we have their eyes on the legal terms as well, so that nothing is overlooked.
I have a question, if I may.
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem LeBron.
When you talk about using an area with impervious cover for an additional parking space, will that require, if I want to do that on my front of my yard, would that require a permit? Is that something that I should submit to the city, like if I were, if I'm
Currently,
gonna make a section,
right, currently,
Check
if you
on the
want to
grass
place,
and
if you want to place an area that's parallel to the roadway, you have to submit plans, but does not require a permit. We have to approve those.
so it would be, so I think that needs to be clarified.
And it does say in the code that we do have to, they're supposed to approach the city about that type of parking space.
So if you sent directly to the ordinance review, could you put a stipulation for a time certain that they would get back? And that way it would not be a delay of more than about one meeting perhaps. It's just a thought. So Councilmember Hambrick?
From what City Manager Lewis said, it looks like we're really only dealing with the first three sentences of Section A. And either we make it, we do it or we don't in terms of, and they can go through ordinance review, that's not a problem, but it's a real simple directive to look at those three sentences and making those changes as necessary. The rest of it wasn't really included originally in the objectives that Manager Lewis talked about. And it's pretty simple, it seems like, but that would be very strict parameters as far as going forward with making this change. There are others, then they haven't really been mentioned other than Councilmember LeBron talking about the parallel market.
I would like to mention something from a perspective. It is not said in this ordinance, and we have streets throughout the city that are very narrow, that have no, if they park in the right of way, such things the right way, and we have homes that have we have some older homes, and you can probably put 4 vehicles on the drive, but there should be some provision, like in the past, when the constable was on the contract, they would go by, see somebody that was, the tire was up the right away, immediately they put a citation. There are circumstances when you have residents, when you have care who are disabled, you have people who come to provide care. There are circumstances when there's a family gathering, some for good reasons, some not for good reasons. I think that maybe, I don't know if it can be written in, but that there be a limit, that they're not, that those things be into consideration. I live on one of the oldest parts of the city, and I have, sometimes the neighbors who have a gathering, they come, they need no place to park. So if they are on the right of way for 30 minutes, 40 minutes for a gathering, we should have some allowance.
Yeah, so generally, what I think you see that addressed is that you set clear and specific timelines. So in other words, there may be no more than 2 vehicles parked in any driveway for more than 48 hours. And if, say, there's a third vehicle that is parked for more than 48 hours, then that would be a violation. Similarly, no parking on the street for more than X amount of time.
Right.
And you can also build into the ordinance that any first violation is also a warning. And then subsequent violations would then result in a citation, so that you have some degree of tolerance for people that have family gatherings, holidays, or some type of party, whatever it might be. But if this is going to work well, it's best to have clear and definite standards about how many vehicles can be visible, the time limits, and then where the vehicles can be visible from. And then what cannot be visible.
And to address your concerns, Mayor Pro Tem, during the discussion, and we both live on the very same street, it's very narrow. And if you allow, and this is why they wrote the ordinance way to have all four tires off the roadway, is because if someone is parked across the street and also is not completely off the roadway, an emergency vehicle cannot get through. And that's why it was addressed during the, when they just last updated this ordinance, is to make sure emergency vehicles could access all parts of the city.
And we have some streets where we don't know what the right of way is because they're so eroded.
Well, we know that basically we have 50-foot right of way. Yeah. But as long as they're off the roadway, and that's why the ordinance was drafted that way, is to make sure emergency vehicles can get through.
And again, I'm just saying that there are circumstances where there has to be some leniency, some consideration.
Right.
In some parts of the city because of the condition of the streets.
So is there any other discussion? And we have just a motion to discuss. We have not refined or have a new motion as to the action. So to send to ordinance review on this matter, or to take a different action. Councilmember Fuller.
Could I go ahead and make a motion?
Certainly.
Okay.
Is there any other discussion?
May I just ask a question before we
Yes,
enter into a motion?
one moment.
Can we take items 4, 5, and 6 and make them in one motion? They're all dealing with ordinances and require review, is why I'm asking.
Well, I think, yes, you could do that, but perhaps one might not really require as much and the other two may. I'm just suggesting that either they all go or they parts go. Is there any other discussion before a motion?
I just prefer to deal with it one at a time because we haven't discussed the others, so we discussed this item, so I'd like to move on this. I'm gonna make a motion.
Yes, if there's
Okay.
any other discussion, well,
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Pulley,
This is item number 5.
4.
Okay. I would suggest we refer item number 4 to legal counsel to begin drafting a revised ordinance, taking into account, and I'm willing to entertain an amendment on this, but, the trailer issue in terms of whether or not it's visible, parking issue, and any other items, I think that the council would prepare to add to this motion, but refer that to legal counsel to start working up a revised ordinance.
Do we have a second? Councilmember Brasco, second.
So could you, I do want to mention something on referral to the Ordinance Review Committee. I would like to see a schedule, some type of timeline. We have 2 ordinances that have been pending for many months. And one of those ordinances, we passed 3 ordinances that include protection to heritage trees, which is becoming of greater concern to me as more and more land goes for sale in the ETJ, where we have currently no coverage or provision. So, and we are sending more ordinance to the Ordinance Review Committee. Is there a process that we can log them when they are received and where they are so that we can track them? Because I am concerned about some of the delays. Signs is also stuck there. I don't think it is that as critical until we have a Papa Got Gas trailer staring us in the face. But I'm concerned about the heritage trees, and as we send more their way, I would like to see a process to track them and time frames and order of priority. I think we need that.
If I could,
Councilmember Rasco?
yeah, because I was going to offer amendment to Councilman's motion that, yeah, as the city attorney is working on these items, that can use the ordinance review committee as a resource in order to expedite this process. So, in other words, more like what I believe Councilman Brisendine was suggesting, that it go through ordinance review committee after council has had a chance to review and start writing stuff, rather than the other way around, which takes some of the load off of ordinance review and expedite the process. So that's what I was looking at.
Can you repeat that? Are you saying that you want to consult with the ordinance review committee?
Just keep them in the loop, yeah.
Okay, I'll accept that amendment.
What I can do is I can get it drafted this week and then send it over to the ordinance review committee. If that's what you think.
So we have a motion with the friendly amendment accepted. Do we have a second? Councilmember Hambrick, second. Is there a discussion on the motion? Further discussion? City Secretary will call the roll.
We're voting on the amendment.
We're voting on my motion with the amendment.
Excuse me.
My motion with the amendment.
It's a motion.
I think we vote on the amendment and then we'll vote on the motion.
Okay.
So the amendment was to, as the city attorney is working on these ideas, use the ordinance review committee as a resource.
I think that's the understanding. Is that correct? Councilmember Pullen, Councilmember
Yes.
Councilmember Hambrick.
Aye.
Councilmember Foley.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem LeBrun.
Aye.
Councilmember Brisendine.
Aye.
Councilmember Weston.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Does anyone need that motion or need that read back? We all understand.
So the main motion, this amendment, was to refer item 4 to legal counsel to devise a draft ordinance with this amendment,
Okay, I didn't hear your last part.
to devise a draft ordinance. I'm sorry, we had. But item 4.
To revise the ordinance, for item
For item 4, yes. This is on item.
Councilmember Foley.
Aye.
Councilmember Rasco.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem LeBrun.
Aye.
Councilmember Hambrick.
Aye.
Councilmember Brisendine.
Aye.
Motions carried unanimously. So, Manager Lewis, would you like for us to proceed with the discussion on the tax notes,
Yes, I believe we should,
since we have,
since,
Speaker.
Mr. Bonus is here.
is that approved by everyone? We'll go to the tax note item 2, begin that discussion and come back to the ordinances after this. Okay. So item 2, discussion on issuance of tax notes and/or general obligation bonds. And I believe that Councilmember Rasco wanted to just make a couple of comments about beginning this process. Is that
Yeah, you know, we've had a lot of chances for discussion through town hall and otherwise about how we are going to tackle the number one priority that our citizens have told us they have, which is fixing the roads. As a result of our comprehensive plan survey, it was by far and away the most critical item, you know, that we have. We think we still need more discussion in the 2 town halls, and during the town halls, we said that we would have
more opportunities for public hearings and citizen involvement and citizen input. What we haven't had is expertise in the way of a consultant that does bond and tax notes and things, that talk to us, be able to sort of explain the differences, what the impacts are, let us ask some questions. And we thought that we know what the tax notes look like. We have sort of an idea what a general obligation bond would look like, and we were just hoping to be able to get into a little bit more discussion on how those would impact us and what sort of what we should be doing, where we should be going. And so we were fortunate to have someone here to work with us on that.
And I think also we had all discussed during those public hearings and public town halls that we needed to have more of that kind of input, and that beginning with council discussing these options for the financing of roads, streets, roads, and repairs, that this would be really important to have this discussion with the understanding that there will be many more and many opportunities for the citizens to have input.
Yeah, this is something that that literally impacts every homeowner, every citizen, in our city. So it's not, we're not looking at it as, whether you have a trailer or not. We're talking about whether you pay taxes to the city to make us a better place. So we need that input. We need to have as much good data, good information as we can get.
Yes, and Manager Lewis, you would please
I will
introduce
introduce, this is Jim Sabonis, and he is the managing director with Hilltop Securities. And they've been our financial advisor for at least 5.5 years. And actually, he goes back a long ways. I think he was there when Southwest or whatever it was.
31 years in my current position.
Thank you.
My favorite words. Meet Mayor, House members. My name is Jim Sabonis, and as indicated, I'm the managing director at Hilltop Securities, and I spent my entire career as an advisor.
And Jim, if you'll hold the mic up, okay, thank you, sir.
As I indicated, I spent my entire career helping municipalities. I spent my entire career working with municipalities. Been involved in over 2,000 bond issues. This week we've already sold 5. It's kind of the end of the year as cities are trying to fund projects. And so I really appreciate Councilman and the mayor's comments earlier. When Brendan said to come and just talk about things, I was trying to think broad topic, and over the last few days trying to decide what to talk about and what to help you get information on to help you make your decisions. It became clear to me, especially driving down this morning, I think the 2 issues are how you issue debt and the process that involves legally, and 2, do you want to stay at your current debt service tax rate, or are you willing to have an increase in your debt tax rate? Let me start by saying that the City of Woodcreek has a value of a little over $200 million. While it's never been rated by the bond rating agencies, our review of your credit would indicate that you'd be an investment grade credit. Somewhere in the BBB to A range, and whether you're rated that way or not, investors will look at you that way. Very good quality credit, very stable city finances. You don't have a lot of variable revenues because the majority of your revenues are ad valorem taxes. In the state of Texas, our state statutes provide direct authority for cities to issue debt, and they indicate exactly how a city would issue debt. Traditionally, We use 3 different methods to issue debt: general obligation bonds, up to 4 years length, fund anything that legally a city can purchase and own or fund. Certificate of obligation, which is called the double barrel pledge, is a pledge of both your interest in seeking tax rate and a revenue. Also can go 4 years. It also can fund anything that a city can fund, with the subtle difference that in the general obligation bond issue, there's 2 November and May elections to be voted by the citizens, by a majority of the citizens. Where certificate of obligation is a process where cities do a notice to the public that they're going to issue a debt, and those indicates not to exceed amount, when they intend to issue the debt, what it'll be used for, and how they intend to repay it. It's published on paper of record and on the website of the city. 45 days after the first publication, if the city doesn't receive a petition, you can issue debt. I'd say probably 80% of the debt we issue certificate of obligation for cities to fund important infrastructure in their normal course of business. Third area is what you've actually funded is a tax note, and actually help in the state use tax notes. They allow a city by just ordinance and a council decision to issue INS debt, and that INS debt fund anything the city can fund, but it can only be for a 7-year amortization. When we originally did it, we did it mostly for being, to have a city to be able to use its long-term credit and high credit rating, and to put something on the INS, not the operating side, for shorter-term capital. We use those commonly for useful life things that are shorter, rolling stock, computers and things of that nature. But a unique thing about your city is that you don't have an enterprise fund. And we found out when we first started working with it a few years ago. We represent a few cities of your nature where, because you don't have an enterprise fund, water, sewer, drainage, park fund that allows for the double barrel pledge, your city can actually issue only 2 kinds of INS debt: general obligation bond or a tax. And why it's important is that for 2 reasons. One is that it's the INS pledge, the separate part of your tax rate component. Your tax rates, as you as council people know, is made up of 2 components. One is for operating, and the other is for the interest in seeking fund for debt service. It is not included in the truth taxation limitation calculation, and being streets or any other public infrastructure is not limited to the recent legislation passed limiting what revenues a city can grow year over year. So you have the ability to fund tax notes or general obligation bond issues. Now, in the case for this city, and this is important for process, is that, again, the tax note is 7 years. The original issue that we did for the city was a 7-year tax note to fund street improvements. In fact, you have 4 years left to pay on that. Current budget year, 3 years after that, it's about $220,000 per year. And based on your current value, it's about 8 cents on your INS tax rate. And so we have very little debt outstanding. We're paying 8 cents on it. So on the concept of games, when Brendan said, what can we do? You have 2 options, tax note or voting bonds. And if you look at the front page, we ran a variety of scenarios. I know that were forwarded and I went through it, but I try to focus it on 3 scenarios, but I think these scenarios, they actually provide you the information you need. Because I think the 2 decisions, if you decide to go forward, you say first, one, that you want to make improvements in your roads and you need to fund them. And the second one would be, do you want to do a tax note or a general obligation, wait and have a bond election? And then along those lines, if you, either case, would you have a tax rate increase or do you want to stay at the 8 cents? And so what we've shown here is kind of a way to analyze those. And based on your current debt outstanding, current market conditions, if we issue new debt and we say, what is your capacity? Staying at 8-cent tax rate and the current taxable assessed value, you can fund a tax note that would fund a project fund of $1,225,000 on a 7-year tax note. If you go forward, you said you want to have a bond election. The way you have a bond election is your next bond election option would be May. You call the election between 45 and 90 days prior to election date. You have the election passes, there's a contest period of 30 days. We would actually fund something in June or July if you wanted to go forward. And at that time, based on the current values, you have a capacity of a project fund of about $2.6 million. Now, just for discussion purposes, if you had a bond election and you said we would be willing to go up 5 cents, not because you want to go 5 cents, really because you want to fund $4.6 million, 5 cents in a 20-year scenario would generate a project fund of $4.6 million. So this kind of opening up the discussion, the two issues that I see is, and we actually have a client, another client that's very similar to your community, where we've done a series of tax notes. And the previous plan that was presented, Brent, would be do a tax note, amortize it for a few years, when you're ready to do your next project, do another tax note and another tax note. It allows you to do some funding. That funding is limited and it's on a case-by-case basis every time you go forward. The second scenario is to vote bonds to either size based on what your project fund is going to be, or size it based on what you think your tax rate maximum will be, and not issue at any time. And what I mean by that is that in the state statutes, details in how we actually have bond elections, and in the public discussion and the information you provide to the public when they vote on it, we make a commitment to them. And what I mean by that is we have to indicate if this election passes, what would be we have to indicate what the existing debt is of the city, what the existing tax rate of the city is, if the debt is approved and issued, how much is the additional principal interest that would take place, and what would be the tax rate impact. So one strategy that some of our clients use, and you see this commonly where you have a multi-year, multi-phase capital improvement program. And one thing to think about if you were going to have a bond election is that, let's say we did have a tax rate limitation, but we had a broad capital improvement program, and this might be something to consider if you decide to go for a bond election. But the point being that, and I use an example, right now we say we can do a 20-year debt, $2.6 million. Hypothetically, if your project engineer said we need $4 million, but you don't want to go up in the tax rate, what you could do, and as Tom was done, say we're going to vote the project fund, the final bonds issued $4 million, but we commit part of our public information and our commitment to the voters that we'll only issue bonds and maintain our 8 cents. So you may issue bonds and fund up to what would be 8 cents. A few years go by and amortize some debt. Value of the city grows some. You fund some more. You always stay at that 8 cent range. And you see it especially common with cities. You have cities that have a $500 million road program, but they have a commitment in managing their tax rate. And it's something that's funded over a number of years. Now, the bond validation lasts about 10 years. It actually can be stretched out if you're making progress on a project, but it's not the path that you put there. The real point being is that if you look at the community and say, what are we trying to do? When we originally did the tax note, what the plan was at the time Now, I think it's just for reference. It was the council's plan, the thought was that we would do a tax note, make an improvement, and the improvement would be brought, constructed on time, under budget, and be positive influence. And at that time, citizens would say, you can do this. Now let's move to a bond election to fully fund the rest of the program. We never got to that phase 2 on that, in that stage, but that's the thought. And so, kind of summarize, and I really want to make it more of a discussion, is that if you were to say, let's move forward right now, and let's get this ready to go with funding, our only option would be a tax note. And again, based on current market conditions, it would get you $1,225,000. That money would be in the city's bank account before the end of the year. If you said, no, we want more money, or we want to go to election, what I would suggest would be, and it's very typical for our clients, put the Blue Ribbon Committee together, citizens, discuss the needs and what the cost of those needs would be, and then make a recommendation to you as a council, what the citizens would like to see in a bond program, what the appropriate size would be. Then you call election between 45 and 90 days prior to the May election day, and have that election. And then that election could be for amount of a project with a tax rate limit, or it could be just one series of bonds. It could be up to what's decided by you when you make the ordinance process. And then again, when we have elections, when you have a bond capacity, more commonly it's not a single bond issue, unless it's a single project. You know, we do a lot of venue, private sports facilities, and unique entities. But when you do streets, usually there are programs that go over time for a couple of reasons. Cities I've worked with that are your size, even if we can fund a complete road repair, we can't construct every road in the city at one time. So it's kind of done in phases, and it's kind of thought through the whole process. So I have to say, driving down here, I think almost every road in Texas is under construction somewhere right now. So I want to get, everyone needs more roads. So really just kind of want to open up for questions. Now, the one thing I want to say that each of those they both pledge your INS tax rate. They're both a pledge of the city's general taxing ability. They have equal credit quality. So what I mean by that is that if you look at when we issue bonds, they have serial maturities. Bonds mature every year. And so for the first 7 years, I would expect the tax note and the general obligation bond, the maturities on an equal year would be priced about the same. General obligation bond, because it's a little bit longer, it's just like a home mortgage. If you have a 20-year mortgage versus a 7-year mortgage, you're paying slightly higher interest rates. I will tell you that interest rates are near historical lows. I have a lot of clients that have right now kind of the information when I talk to my clients, and what I've done it all over my career, and I believe this is that we never issue debt because interest rates are low. We take interest rates into consideration when issuing it. So the clients that we've had a lot of bond issues the last couple of weeks, but it's because those clients have approved budgets and committed to do fundings. And as you all know, and I'm sure bought gas out here and I paid more than I did yesterday, probably more than last week. And inflation started to come, and we're starting to see rising interest rates. The Fed's indicated that their monetary policy is going to start to change the open market participation because the clients start next week. So we start seeing interest rates popping up. So a lot of our clients say we're going to fund something. We have a little flexibility, but we told them to think about moving forward as soon as possible. If you like the interest rates, more likely rates will be up and down. But I don't believe that interest rates are a reason to fund things.
Only question I have to begin with is if we went with refinancing plus the go bond of 5% impact on a $300,000 house, that looks like about $1,500 a year. Does that sound about right in terms of your figures? As opposed to the tax note.
Again, my math say that 5 cents on a $300,000 home would be about, if I'm correctly, maybe $150.
150 a year?
Yeah, I mean,
Is it valuation per 100?
now valuation minus any exemptions, divide by 100 times. Three.
About 385.
385? For 20 years.
At the, 12.8.
That the total cost or the increase.
That would be including the already that the citizens are paying, so that, yeah, what's your percent? So it, the extra 5 cents. $150
Per year.
Yeah, more than what they're paying right now. On a $300,000 home.
Okay, so we take what the bill I get from the county and whatever we're paying now, which includes the tax that we're paying on. You add $150 to that
Month. Or a year, $150 a year, or the 5 cents extra.
for
300
40 years, and that gets us $4.5 million.
Councilmember Brisendine.
Thank you. I have another question. Because we already have a debt service on the tax note, if we are eligible for $4,600,000, that would have to be rolled into that.
We've already taken that into consideration.
Okay.
So this is net impact taking into consideration.
That's a net figure in the 4.6 for a 5 cent impact.
Yes.
Thank you.
Councilmember Pulley.
Just a couple of, I guess, amateur questions. So if, depending on what scenario that we utilize here, if there's a certain tax rate that has to be baked in terms of how we handle taxation going forward.
And let me say, there's no basic question. This is some of the most complex finance. I know it's interesting. I go to communities and last few days we funded a couple $100 million. This complexes community that AAA community we just did $120 million for those communities. You're actually right. So what I mean by that is, and I don't think these are scenarios. These are more to give you ideas of how to think about this. And the difference between a 7-year tax note and a GO refunding or capacity, how you get there. Show you the limits on a tax note. But to indicate to you that the one good thing about Texas, I love living in Texas. I have family all over the country, and glad to come back here when I visit them. We are transparent and we're very structured. In fact, when you look at a rating report about a city, and when they issue that, they'll say our legal debt issuance process is structurally strong. What they mean by that is the very formal processes that indicate we pledge an INS tax. When we pledge an INS tax, you say this, but if we drop by 20% in value, tax rate's going to go a little bit up, right? But we pledge our INS tax. Secondly, that our statute says specifically how you do things. And in that, when it says it, and again, over the last couple legislative sessions, legislators expanded, to do bond legislation like this probably, I guess, the attorney, but it's probably going to be 2 pages of writing, maybe more confusing than not, but they'll actually detail all the debts that are outstanding in the city, principal and interest, what the current tax rate is, and what the proposed maximum impact would be. So what I would say would be that when we have a program, we take that financial model and we take aspects of that financial model and we give them to the attorney, the bond counsel, and they write it and say, the public, here's what we're committing. And so, yes, you'd actually say, effectively, let's say that we're going to have a maximum 5 cent tax rate increase, but we're going to vote $6 million in bonds. I'm just using this as a hypothetical example. So we go forward, and that vote will take place in May. When June comes, a couple things take place. There's a new variables. One is talk to Brett and say, what's the current value? Value might be down, might be up. It's going to have a minor impact. We've had some slight growth, but it would have an impact. And then interest rates themselves. You know, we been a little bit conservative in what we've used here, but because we know elections will be May, but I would expect that between now and May, for a planning purpose, for the disclosures and for your planning, I might use 50 basis points down. Now, I don't know. Either could be more. We try to be conservative, so we have that. And so that program would fluctuate, but what does take place is, you know, we're not going to go above that. So that's all disclosed in the document, and that's good. And that's where, in case of your community, I would think, I'm not sure exactly what the dollar amount you're talking about, but I wanted to bring the concept of not thinking of a bond, geo bond as a single bond issue, thinking it as a capacity based on the ability and willingness to pay at that time. So, you know, if you're going to go through the process, and in my years and the clients, a lot of their experience has been the most successful. When you think through, and I mentioned a blue ribbon community planning process, I know this community's done a lot of effort and time already thinking about it, but you know, my experience has been that if we're going to have a program, we really have to think through how we benefit all communities and roads. Very rare nowadays that you find a targeted road improvement and bond if you have a road program that meets the needs of the community overall. That may or may not be done in phases.
So if I understand it, the bondholder doesn't dictate to us what the tax rate is, but that is taken into consideration in terms of what risk analysis might be.
So the bondholder, to be frank with you, the bondholder, because you pledge INS, they're not concerned about 5 cents. You know, whether we pay 8 or 5 cents, it's a pretty low tax rate, but you've got the INS pledge, and that's secondary. The Attorney General of Texas and your citizens are the ones that are going to say that's what you committed to us, and that's who is concerned. To be frank with you, people actually say to me, "What's our real debt capacity?" I would say, well, I kind of generally over the years have broken down in 3 ways. And one would be what your current tax rate is, you know, whether it's 20 years or 7 years, without change your tax rate. That's step 1. You know, step 2 is maybe kind of thinking about what the average of communities of your nature would be, and similar communities. You're far lower than that, but in step 2 might say, what if you did a nickel, it might be this. But if you were to look at your legal limit, you know, it's far beyond, you know, tripling your tax rate. You know, we look at our average city tax rate could be so much higher, and investors would buy it because in Texas, levy ad valorem taxes pledged by people wholesale property. I do a lot of special project financing, land secured financing on new projects, and money pours into Texas because people want to buy bonds. So the real estate is that investors not going to be concerned about 5 cents, 10 cents. You know, it's insignificant. You know, they're going to look at an honest pledge of the city of Woodcreek, a stable, creditworthy city, and so. But to summarize, by making a statement, the AG vote indicates that we've made a pledge by informing our voters what's going to take place in that pledge is the bond. Yeah.
One last question I have for you. Is there any different effect on the amount of reserves we have to maintain for either tax note or bond?
Well, you know, since we're paying ad valorem taxes, what I do think that again, you have a pretty high level of current ad valorem tax collections, and I do think that traditionally you see in cities, when you look at your ad valorem tax collections, we can look at your historical default rate, but I think there would be when we do an INS tax, there's not a debt service reserve that's required, and the reason being that is that the process would be we levy taxes that year, we pay those taxes. But I do think that in some of my communities, we might look at the reserve and say, well, do we expect bigger foreclosure rate? Unlikely. Do we expect late payments? Unlikely. So I would think right now, I don't know, Brian, what percentage collection rate do you use when you do your budget?
We're right at 98%.
90% of what?
98%
Of what?
of what the projected inflation would be.
Okay.
So, I mean, this is not a revenue account, this is so take the 98%. I think that we're gonna say 98%. In fact, in truth and taxation, your county tax estimate collector will really monitor your balances and require you to clean those balances out or consider over taxation. So the general rule of thumb is, most clients of mine might keep about 1 month of reserves, and consistency. That's really more due to payment timing of when they receive taxes and collections. But to summarize, we don't have a debt service reserve account on IS tax. We collect current taxes.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
And let me say, my follow-up is that, I'm just gonna probe this, I know it's kind of a work session, but if the council have any thoughts of direction, we can provide some extensive modeling for you on this process. Are there any thoughts of what you're leaning one way or another, or do you have some numbers? If you want to follow scenarios with Brenton, we'll provide it for you, but, yeah, let me summarize that we can do the tax note now, and we have a few clients that have a similar financial structure as you do, that we tax notes every couple of years for, and we work through the process. And then we have a lot of clients that vote bonds. It's really a decision for the community and what you decide to do. And one thing I will say though, if you do vote bonds, there is a state, Rio has administrative policy that you can't have another vote for a long-term bond issue for that purpose for 3 years. So schools are exempt from that, but in the cities, if you have, we would, if you had to fund the road improvement, uniquely, you could do a tax bill for it, it's exempt. You go back to the 7-year scenario, but you wouldn't be able to have a vote for 3 years. Yeah, and 3 years.
No, it's 3 years.
Councilmember Bamford?
One last for me. So a tax note could occur with a bond issue following in the next year. So the cities can move forward without, and start some improvement before they get the large amount to do a more significant amount of improvement growth.
That's a common strategy, and especially now where we're in a rising interest rate environment. We have another kinds of corporate things to do phases, and what we would do is we could sell tax note, set it up where you have an option if we want to fund it, interest rates are lower, and do your bond program later. In fact, the original plan was to do exactly that concept. But and to give a feel from tax note, you've issued one, and I know we went through the process. The concept with a tax note is just by ordinance, because you limit to the 7-year amortization, city council makes that decision to go forward. Typically what we would do would be, we're kind of in process here, but let's say I just got a call from Brett, so we're under tax note. Prepare materials and do a presentation, just bring forward, so they're ready to sell next time. A competitive sale, and in a competitive sale, we have a number of, we've actually done a number of competitive tax sales in the last 2 weeks. The banks are very interested in these obligations. And if you sign the other way, if you go forward and move forward sooner than later, because interest rates are starting to move. On the bond election, again, work to be done to develop your program. We would work with you to do whatever financial modeling and any variety of programs you decide. Then there's a specific time frame. It's unique that election has to be called between 45 and 90 days prior to do that. But a lot of work is done. You know, if we wait to that time frame, then to me, most of my clients don't. It's unlikely to see them wait and everything's prepared and you call election. But that would take place in May, resulting in earliest we would plan something to be late June with potential July.
Any other questions? Manager Lewis, any comments
No.
this time? Okay. Well, we do appreciate it very much, and I'm sure we'll learn a lot from this and have some time to digest. It's a lot of information.
And I know,
Thank you.
and Mayor, I just want to say, I know part of this is education. It's really, you have issues about that, and it's not something commonly done. So what I encourage council, work friendly, if there's some scenarios that you'd like to model out, you know, many concepts that you want, we will actually do that. You come as often as you want us to present them in that process. But these I just want to give a thought, because really to me the two variables are continued maybe a recurring tax note issuance versus doing a bond program. And for you as elected officials, make a decision for me which way you want.
Well, the one thing that I'm noticing, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but that with all of the options, two main options are time driven by legal requirements. Is that correct? So we have to make decisions that are driven by a timeline. And I just wanted to say that because without discussing what those all are, I believe that there's a significant timeline of also on either one.
And we also have the time constraints of the funds that we have received. We have the time constraints. We also have funds that we have received from the American Relief Act for drainage. And they should be, there is a time constraint about when to use those. And I have one concern that I have from the experience in Procolo is that whatever assumptions we made on the costs of repairing, some places, replacing the streets, be accurate, because we make a commitment, a financial commitment to bonds, we can go back in a year or two to say, oops, we missed it. So we have to be very careful with our technical requirements and our assessments, but the timeline is pretty tight. To 2024, if I'm not mistaken, for the American Relief Act.
For the use of those funds, which is part of any road repair or street repair would include or needs to include the issues of drainage and how that money will be allocated for that. So
And I think Mayor,
just a situation. I think that I'm just bringing to the table that those timelines are going to play a big role on accomplishing any new road repair in the next year or two, depending on how the financing is decided by council.
I mean, for time, I think that's one thing. I don't predict the future, but I can say that I've seen the challenges in the agonizing bid openings of a number of my clients over the last couple of years is prices have escalated, and being in an inflation period, or just getting people to be able to bid and mobilize on projects to be a challenge. So much work to be done. Timing's an issue, and I do think that as you talk to your engineers, to have them very carefully consider monthly price escalations that are taking place now. If you move to an election to capture what you're talking about that takes place.
And I guess just, could you reiterate that the issue of, on the tax note, I'm really not great on this area, but on the tax note, if it were issued and council took that action with input, that it's not the same kind of timeline or requirement as it is to do a bond, that it, then there would be funds available, saying, increment, the first increment for use for our repair. And then if the citizens went forward, they wanted to do it on election and finance that way, then this tax note is rolled into, is that correct? I just want to make sure I understand that that money then is rolled into the bond funds. Is that correct?
Yeah, and what in concept, and generally, yes, but let me take, I'm just gonna use page 3 of 4 as the illustration. And column C shows you taxable value, and for conservative planning, we're gonna assume that we maintain our value. We're not gonna go up 2 or 3% per year. Column D shows what your existing debt service is. And based on your current 2020 budget that you're actually working in, 2022 budget, your tax rate levy is 7.8 cents. And you can see that the debt service is level, and in our municipal bond world, level means within 5,000 denomination bond, so it's as close as we can get using a 5,000 denomination. Now the question is, if we want to issue new debt, we have to take into consideration any new debt in addition to the existing debt would cause a tax rate increase. So what we would do, and what we've set up for you, is a general obligation and refunding bond. And what we mean is that we are limited, again, paying somewhere in slightly over $200,000 a year. We can't increase it. So what we refunded, and we would blend it into a new debt issuance. And as you can see that in the blue, the source and uses of funds, we pay off our old tax note, and we issue new debt, and we have, now, I would say that when I think about when I went to school 45 years ago, someone said, okay, we finance something. But the unique thing about it is that one disadvantage about using tax notes is funding a long-term asset for 7 years. Now, my mentor, economics professor, when I was grad school, would say it's just as bad to amortize something too short, or it's like useful life, than amortizing too long. I'm not saying that we need it all the time, but what it does do is we have to kind of think through and how we get through. So, in your case, we're all talking about what is your value of your streets and useful life of the streets that are remaining, and how do we do that? So, to answer the question, yes, it's all rolled in, and you can see that when we look at the numbers, we're really doing a new money and refunding bond, because we're refunding the existing, funding your new money bond program. The voted authorization only counts against the new money portion, but we take into consideration. So yes, our plan would be, if you were to sell tax notes, to put a tax note out there to make it callable anytime. And if you decide, if we voted GO bonds, we might refund that and just look at the overall program. And think of your debt as one, not an issue, but what's your overall debt burden? And one thing about the two programs, I've tried to be very conservative in how we approach this. I will tell you, that we've done a number of times that would not use recommendation, use it more as illustration, but it's unique in our state statute that we can do a 7-year tax. We can refund it for up to 40 years, when we do a general obligation refunding bonds, because you can do a general obligation refunding bonds. And there are some special situations, and I'm going to use a real life one where it was a very practical application. I have a client that is city not much larger than you, very similar size. It was in a very large county where there were a number of ETJ utility districts built. And the ETJ utility districts ended up having 2 to 3 times the population of that community. But that community provided in-kind service, which started to cost them a lot. So a resolution was to decide to have a emergency service district and to bring in the geographic area so everyone paid their fair share. And so the city of emergency, there was a vote, the emergency service district was created. And then it came time to fund the increased infrastructure needed for both the combined ETJ districts and the city, and a new fire and public safety bill. And so it was determined that it would be allocated costs based on population initially, and then operating costs on population going forward. And some information was put in place, and the district outside the city was going to fund, in this case, let's say 60% of it, the city was going to fund its 40%. And they were together going to build a central location located in the city, which would be a tremendous upgrade for their fire services. And so we came forward and presenting in a similar situation. This was decided to fund a certificate of obligation, which is a common tool, but found out that there were some people that weren't very happy that the volunteer fire department now was going to become a professional pay for fire department, and they received a petition. And so I was ready to sell bonds. We received a petition the night of sale, and the council said, we have an opportunity to build this, have only 40% of the cost we have all in our city, and otherwise the burden, small group of people, for non-important reasons decided against it. And they said, we want to fund it. We came back with a plan. They said we would do a 7-year tax note based on a 20-year amortization for the first 6 years, and then 7th year would be a bullet maturity. Sometime over the course of the 6 years, when interest rates were favorable, and the city was going forward another capital improvement program, we would actually refund that and put it into a normal 20-year amortization. You're following? So we did that 3 years ago, and about 2 months ago, interest rates were at their low, and the city was actually just funding the annual capital improvement program. We refunded it and put it back into its normal structure. Now, not something I recommend communities do, but in my career, I've seen a lot of communities do that. They had to fund something because they were limited by only unit tax. So I'm just going to mention that as an option, but it's one. And I give credit to this community because this community didn't do it as an end run. They did it very publicly. They had actually a number of work sessions and discussed it publicly about challenges they faced because a small group who just didn't really like the whole concept and had voted against the original Creation University District, but the majority of that community really wants it, and they did it. Full received and everything worked out as planned. So it was a very public process to get through that, but it's kind of an option. I didn't present it because I think in your case, straightforward tax note or GO one way or another.
Yeah, at that point, I mean, at this point, that's what we need to, what are the basic options? We start discussing if, we have ideas that need some more creativity, then, we can count on you. But I know I learned a lot. One of the things I learned is that we've been bouncing around a lot of numbers, that it's nice to get a little bit of better handle on taking each scenario, and I like the way you threw in the third one to take it, so we keep things where they are, and just keep doing 7-year tax notes. We could roll our tax note into a smaller 20-year bond and not pay anything extra than what we're doing now. or for, a little bit more a year, we can get more roads done. So now it's up to us to, get a group working on what scenarios are, get some input, go door to door. Get this moving, but we are in something.
And you said just talking to my team, they had provided like 6 scenarios, 20, 25 years, and we get to those level of details at the time. To me, it comes down to, you want to maintain your existing tax rate? Question number 1. 2, do you want to just fund for the tax bill or go through the bond election process? Kind of go through. I mean, those 2 decisions start the process, and then we can do detail. And as you move forward, we can do some more technical analysis about, real defined scenarios. And I throw out the crazy things. We can be creative, but my experience with this community coming before this council, this is a pretty straightforward issue to resolve for you. We're always there to meet the needs of our communities, but it's something in a scenario like that, we don't want to do if we were forced to do something. There are other unique options. Now, there's other ways they can issue debt, but the issue, anything else that you do, we're required to be on your operating tax side, and based on very, efficient government you have, and only ability to fund most of the majority of your costs through ad valorem taxes and so on, to fund anything on that side. So that's what it comes down to. But we're here to help and to expand any way possible. We can have rental master, we can do Zoom meetings and do scenarios, come present them to the council. How you choose to, we'll be there to help that process.
Thank you for that.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. We'll be hearing from council soon. Thank you. And do we need to take about a 5-minute recess, or do you want to go through with the next 2 items?
5 minutes.
Like a 5-minute recess? We'll take a 5-minute recess. It's 3:31 p.m.
And you get, you will. Appreciate you giving a lot of information that I
So you will resume the meeting.
All
Okay. See, can you hear it? Okay.
You gotta have a radio voice.
So I'm really out of order. Do any of the citizens have a comment about this tax note or the bond election? Any that you just heard? I would entertain any comments that you have on this time, which is out of order, but
I'm happy to be out of order. A citizen comment?
yes.
You brought up drainage and you brought up infrastructure, and I would have to tell you that part of the new federal that has been passed is billions in nature-based infrastructure, and I just want to put that out there and get that in the atmosphere, because great concrete is very efficient and very effective, but maybe restored wetlands over close to Cypress Point, or all kinds of different rain gardens. There's a lot of different ways to go, including the way we've done Augusta Park, the way that it's done next to the entrance. There's a lot of nature-based ways to achieve drainage that are very durable, very cost-effective, and now equally financeable as final grade concrete infrastructure. So just add that to the mix.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Any other comments? All righty, well, we'll go forward on the agenda, and we are doing item 5, discussion and take appropriate action on an ordinance amending Title 15 Land Usage, Chapter 156, zoning, subsections 156.009 and 156.059 of the City of Woodcreek Code of Ordinances as it relates to parking spaces. May I have a motion?
I
Councilmember Rasco.
may. I've actually already been sort of talking about this when we were talking about item 4. There's similarities, and my motion would be that we refer to council and have council work with the ordinance review committee, come back with the wording that we can look at to fix the issue. But that's my motion.
So that's to our legal counsel. I second the motion. Second.
And then, Nancy Lewis may have something to say about it, just in explanation.
I can explain why it's on there.
So we have a motion, Councilmember Rasco, and seconded by Councilmember Brizendine, and discussion. And so if you would, Manager Lewis, give us a little explanation.
Okay, basically, there's been, this again, about 2.5 years ago, was the last time this was explored, and this was through planning and zoning, so this would be a change in the zoning code. But right now, it shows 3 hard surface parking spaces, 10 by 20, on a driveway. We have several citizens that are concerned that we don't count the garage as a parking space. And I know when I went through planning and zoning, they said, well, a lot of people will store $5,000 worth of junk with their $50,000 car out front. And so they wanted to make sure there's parking spaces inside the garage, actually on the driveway, because again, when you look at our streets, we don't have that much parking available unless it's actually on the property. During the process, people have been very, very imaginative about how to get the 3 parking spaces or 10 by 20, because it does not really define. It says you should be able to access them, but we have them in town where you've seen it looks like a T. We have one where you have two, parking spaces that are actually perpendicular to the garage, or like you could drive into the garage. And the other 10 by 20 is at the very end of it. And because the way the ordinance is drafted too, is that it does not allow any of the parking spaces to be counted on city right. So basically you have to have all 10 by 20, the 3 10 by 20 parking spaces within the parking lot. And, also, you know, because it says a hard surface driveway, it does not say, define what hard surface is. It doesn't say it's gonna be concrete, asphalt, or anything else. And so there's been some changes too, where people have said, well, I have hard surface to park on, but to meet my impervious cover is, basically we have rock in between or something like that. And it kind of brings back my memories of, going to, an area in the 50s. I wasn't there yet, but they had the 2 brick, places to park. Yeah, you drove up there and everything else was grass. And so, and also in the code, I think one that was the first, section of the code that was read is the definition. It says that if you have, you can have a subcompact space if it does not exceed 25% of the parking spaces. Well, then the question is, and this has been brought up by developers, if you have 3 parking spaces, you can't ever meet that 25% because that's 1/3. And so you can't have a subcompact space. You have to have a full 10 by 20 space. And that's why it was put on the agenda for the discussion and to see which direction council wants to go on.
Thank you. So we have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion by council?
I'd like to say that I think it is absolutely ridiculous that we do not count a garage that someone has paid for and put all of that money into, and we can't count it as a parking space. How they use it is not our business, but I think it should be allowable as a parking space. That's my opinion. I park my car in my garage every day. And I think a lot of residents do.
That was.
I agree with you. I've got half of my garage, but the other half of the parking, and, yeah,
And I mean, I agree.
Councilmember LeBron?
Yeah. No, I agree. I thought that one of the issues is that so many garages are full of things besides cars, but it should count. They should definitely count. I park my car in the garage every day. I can't now because my garage door is broken, but other than that.
Councilmember Pulling, I'm sorry, you were talking.
I was just saying, I agree with Judy. I think we ought to count that as a parking space. My garage is half full of junk, but I still put a car in there. So, it seems, I don't like that. So I agree.
I think what we're really trying to do here is clean some of these ordinances up and get them to where they're realistic for today's living in our city.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, if
you
there's
have
no
a
further
two-car garage-
discussion. Oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember.
If you have a 2-car garage, you should count as 2 parking spaces. The other thing that occurs in many of the areas, particularly with the narrow streets, is that you have an excess of vehicles parked in every which direction, every which location, and it makes it difficult. There is a particularly serious site obstruction on Champion Circle and Canyon Creek Drive. Very serious, that it costs near accidents, and that's not a unique intersection in the city where it happens. So,
Can I just ask one technical question of Manager Lewis? So, you know, we can approve a space parallel to the street. So if I want to put gravel down for additional parking in front of my house, but is there any reason why that could not be counted as a third space?
Well, because the way the ordinance is written, it talks about you have to have those 3 spaces on your property. And since it's, the space that is presented to the city out by the road, which is parallel to the roadway with all four tires off of the roadway, is actually on city right of way.
So that's my point. So the ordinance, I mean, so you could look at the ordinance and for, in that case, say that, on property or on approved city right of way. The reason it's sort of important is that, we do have a problem here, every single day on almost every street that, we just didn't get the word out that it's four tires off pavement. And if more of us had those sort of approved parking areas, then it just make it easier. Also, if we have the signage around and just, explain the rule to the people that are coming in to visit, might help as well.
That can't be counted as one of the three spaces, however, because it is on the right of way, and many people have lost those when utilities had to get to them.
Right.
So I
But of course,
think
if we
home property parking is
One record.
if we count the garage as two spaces, then all you need is driveway space for the third space anyway.
We won't discuss all the problems that could be caused by that. That will be discussed after, our legal counsel comes up with the ordinance.
Yeah, but, so this is always an issue. When you look at a right of way, public utility, whatever you want to call it, it is merely a legal right that exists, and anything that you place within a right of way or public utility, such as construction or removal. But what we do know is that in this city, as the other city, there's a driveway and a mailbox on every lot that exists within the right of way and any public utility easement. So I think if this council is so inclined to say, sure, you can put a gravel or a lychee or whatever it is the city wants to approve you guys to pick, parking spot that abuts the road, you can, however, you do so at your own peril. And if in fact, it is partially or fully destroyed because the work that must be done right of way public utilities, you get that and acknowledge it and repair it. But there's nothing that prevents the city from allowing that type of use.
But I think as we're discussing in this particular ordinance, is as it pertains to new construction and getting it in the building process, not necessarily going in and putting in a soft surface, if you will, for additional parking.
So,
Okay.
is there any other discussion?
No. I do want to go back, I think on record on section D, where you have a prohibition of 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. for, in some circumstances, you may need, it has to be some type of permit. I know circumstances where there are 24-hour caretakers. And we need to make allowance for that.
When that was written into the ordinances, correct me if I'm wrong, Britton, the emergency services had some input on that particular part of the ordinance, because blocking at night when people are sleeping and emergency vehicles not being able to get access to the homes is why that was written. Isn't that not correct? Because I was on ordinance review when that was.
Would that apply if my question is here, I have a need for that parking space and I do the soft permeable cover on the right of way so that that person can park there? Would that not be an exception?
Well, I think that's what you found where there's a conflict between the two ordinances.
I think we need to understand circumstances I mean,
Maybe the permit is, maybe
something,
permitting.
something to that effect. I have greater concern with the big trailers that are parking on the narrow streets. And we have two right now that are causing problems for the residents on those streets.
So, any other comments, any discussion, further discussion? All city secretary, call the roll.
Councilmember Brizendine,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem LeBrun,
Aye.
Councilmember Foley,
Aye.
Councilmember Hambrick.
Aye.
Councilmember Rasko,
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. We'll go to item 6, discussion and take appropriate action on an ordinance amending the City of Woodcreek Code of Ordinances as it relates to fences. Would you like to have an explanation from the manager as to the reason for this item before we begin?
Sure, okay.
Okay.
Basically, in the Code of Ordinances, again, I believe it's in 156 also, that it talks about, addresses good neighbor fencing. And, we run into the situation where, the ordinance requires a good neighbor fence when you put in a new fence. But you might have an individual that already has a fence next to the fence that is supposed to go in. And so basically what is happening is the individual cannot put a good neighbor fence in unless he moves 5 foot in. And because then if they want to put right a budding or parallel to the existing fence on the other people's property, they can put in a non-good neighbor fence and have good side faced in. And so that's one thing we've been trying to address is because it says a new fence has to be a good neighbor fence. And that's why this was put on the agenda.
So good neighbor fence meaning that the finished side is out.
Yes.
So if there's an existing fence, somebody wants to put up a new fence, you couldn't just attach to.
Well, in fact, there's situations where the existing fence property owner does not want them to use their fence.
Well, may I please have a motion that we can begin discussion?
I'll make a motion that we refer this to legal counsel for updating it, subject to the discussion that we have now.
And a second?
Second.
So Councilmember Cooley, the main motion, seconded. Councilmember Rasko, now we can go for discussion.
Okay, can I add on to what I was discussing, other than just the good neighbor fence now, since we're in the discussion? And also, under the, but using our ATS, and also that in our definitions, a fence is a structure and you cannot build a structure across property. And so that's another situation that has occurred that because how our that a fence is defined as a structure cannot be built across property lines, then we're not able to allow to be built across the property line because of the definition.
So it's obvious that we need to clear up some of these issues, and Councilmember Cooley.
Yeah, I just want to clarify the property lines you're talking about when people own multiple lots and they want to build a fence across their own property.
That's right, because if you have multiple lots and some people classify it as an interior lot line, but it's really not an interior lot line because it is a lot line. But because our code says you cannot build a structure across a property line, a fence is a structure. So if they own 3 lots, they can't build across those property lines even though they own the adjacent lots.
Yeah, that's part of what we're trying to clear up, right?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. Councilmember Rasko.
So my thinking is just a question of definition. So, I think of a structure as something that is permanent, It's got a concrete slab. It's got, if I were to sell that other lot, it would be very difficult to clean up whatever was crossing the property. So if a fence, for instance, or one of those little plastic greenhouses, or whatever it is that is not really that kind of a permanent structure, if there was a definition that fences and other things could fall into, and that it would have to be contiguous lots owned by the same person. So in other words, what we're saying is multiple lots.
What you're saying also too, when you talk about a greenhouse or something like that, because that is an accessory structure. And on that lot, you don't have the primary structure, so how can it be an accessory structure? So it can't be permanent. And that's why you have to put those things on with the primary structure unless you change the definition.
Right.
Councilmember Foley.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say, if you own this property, even if you have multiple lots, I think it's a private property matter. If you want to build a fence across it, okay, if you actually want to build a structure across your property lines, you're gonna set yourself up for trouble with the title company, but it's a private property, and you will deal with that. I don't think the city should be involved in regulating private property title. So I think we're on the right track.
Well, we're on the right track, but as long as the council has adopted 2015 IRC and IBC, because it talks about going across property lines.
Well, I read that, what it says, it talks about encroaching. You can't encroach on your own property.
Yeah. Well,
I don't interpret that IRC or IBC the same way you do.
well, I'm not interpreting it. That's our engineers that we do have the inspection.
Right.
There's
I
one.
read the email. The email said his concern was it's a title issue down the road. Yeah, it's a title issue, but it's a private property title issue. Government should not be involved in private property title issues. So I think we're on the right track, is what I'm saying.
Councilmember Cameron.
Sounds as simple as making an amendment as accepted, or with the exception being in case of contiguous pieces of property owned by the same person. And if they have a problem later on, they can either tear down part of the fence, or they can take away the greenhouse, or whatever it happens to be. But it sounds like it needs to be sent to legal counsel just to clean up the language more than anything else.
Is that an amendment? So
You've already said
I would accept the amendment.
It's not really an amendment. I think it's just reiterating.
Second comment. Your motion stands as it is, Councilmember Foley.
Say again, ma'am?
Your motion stands as
Okay.
it's not amended. Councilmember President, aye.
So I'm understanding that the definition of good neighbor fence is putting the solid side toward your neighbor. So I'd like to see where that's written, because I know in several subdivisions where I'm property, a good neighbor fence is putting a board alternating on either side.
Well, that's accepted, yes, because it is a good neighbor on both sides.
That's what. So my question is, on the situation you were discussing, that they're having to sit the fence in 5 feet, why can't it be put on their property and alternating boards?
Well, and what they get into is the alternating board that's on the outside, they cannot access it to put it in. They can't nail it in.
The existing fence belongs to the neighbor?
Yes.
Is what you're saying?
Yes, and they do not want them to be able to use their existing fence as part of their fence.
Those are not good neighbors.
Any other?
So why just out of curiosity, why the 5 foot?
Well, I'm just saying, be able to get in there.
Oh,
Because
you need 5 feet.
basically on between most people's properties, everyone has a 5 foot utility easement between.
Mhm.
So then you can still access, even though you're on your neighbor's property, you have that easement to be able to maintain your own fence.
Benefit.
And so that way, it's not like you're trespassing because there is an easement there. Most people work it out.
And that's what I would suggest,
Yeah.
if possible. If there's no further discussion, the city secretary call the roll.
Councilmember Pulley.
Aye.
Councilmember Brizendine.
Aye.
Councilmember Rasko.
Aye.
Councilmember Henry.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem LeBrun.
Motion carried unanimously, and we are adjourned.
All unanimous.